Good afternoon and welcome to Complex PTSD TV. My name's Linda. I'm a certified trauma recovery coach and actually Australia's first certified trauma recovery coach and the world's first advanced NPE, not parent expected coach. And today I want to be able to share with you some information about what is complex PTSD. Now, the reason why I want to share with you hang on, let's just pause. I'm all excited. The reason why I want to share this with you today is because it's going to become more prevalent next year. So then we ask, why next year and why not now? Okay, so I did up an infographic for you so that even though I'm talking, you can pause this at any time and read it, so that, because we all know that our memories are actually challenged with complex PTSD. So I wanted you to be able to go pause. Okay, now with complex PTSD, the DSM-5, which is what a lot of countries use, which originates in America, it's the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. Now, it came out a few years ago now and didn't include complex PTSD as a separate diagnosis. It lists under PTSD a dissociative disorder, but not actually complex PTSD. Now, I'm listening to a whole new series for complex PTSD by people who are leaders in the trauma field, and they explained how political and so many other things that go into the DSM-5 are, and how they've been, and I knew that people like Bessel van der Kolk, who wrote The Body Keeps the Score, and a lot of his cohorts have been campaigning for decades to get complex PTSD into the DSM-5. However, still, unto this day, universities globally are not taught trauma. So if you were to go into university, whether it's a psychologist or a psychiatrist, and get training, medical training of any nature, trauma as a mental health condition is not taught. And I've got one psychologist here in Australia who said they had one semester where it mentioned trauma but barely went into it anyhow. So I have psychologists and psychiatrists see me as clients as well worldwide because it's not being taught. Okay, so that's the reality of where we're at. And the series that I'm listening to said the DSM-5 refused to put complex PTSD into it in the DSM-5 because the professionals haven't been trained in it, and they believe that it would cause all manner of strife. Obviously, our professionals need to be trained in it. Okay, so that's the DSM-5. Now, and a lot of us have heard of the DSM-5, and there's also the ICD-11. Okay, so now the ICD-11 catalogues known human diseases, so think of the physical side, medical conditions and mental health disorders, and is used for insurance coding purposes, for statistical tracking of illnesses, and as a global health categorization tool that can be used across countries and in different languages. So it's far broader, far more reaching than the DSM-5, which originates out of the United States. Now, the importance of the year 2022, which is next year, the ICD-11 will list officially complex PTSD as a separate diagnosis as of January the 1st, 2022. The preliminary version was released on June the 18th, 2018. And so we've got basically 6 months left till it's here. It's official. Complex PTSD is an official diagnosis. And there's going to be a lot of catching up for professionals to do. And even the professionals that I'm listening to in the course I'm doing said that the general public's ahead of the curve. And you know what? We've had to be, because so many of us have been looking for answers for so long as to why our adult life gets disrupted. So in my case, I've spent over 25 years looking for answers, and I lost all of my cognitive functions because nobody knew what was going on internally for me. Heck, I didn't know. I just knew something was wrong internally. I've been through stages where I felt like I had this gaping hole inside of me all the way through, and I've written courses and they all help. But it wasn't until I got to the neuroscience that I got to the deep healing. Now, it is important that if you're looking, asking the question, do I have complex PTSD? It's not going to just be apparent. It doesn't turn up normally. If it's from childhood developmental trauma, which impacts our brain, it doesn't normally turn up till later in life where we begin to get sick. So my first illness was actually at 16, but they couldn't have done anything then. They had no clue why I developed epilepsy out of the blue. And then the next major one was when I had my son, and 5 months later I had postnatal depression. And my doctor sat there and said, no, not you. You're the last person I thought would get it. Now, in order to begin looking into, do I have complex PTSD now before you can get an official diagnosis? And by the way, there are some clinicians who are trained in trauma, not just trauma informed. We're talking trained in trauma, who will give complex PTSD diagnosis because they do their work, okay? So what you can do, the first thing you can do is Google ACEs test. That's ACE apostrophe S test. They're free, and the ACEs test, the mini one is 1 out of 10, and a lot of us get 8, 9, 10 out of 10 the first time we do it, and we go, if somebody had initiated this test when I had postnatal depression, they would have seen that I scored even a minimum of 4, and we know that a minimum of 4 impacts our physical health, okay? So that is a very good starting point to have a look at. If you've struggled with relationships, and I've been through 2 marriages, 2 divorces, I've got 3 children, 3 adult children to their father, who was my first husband. He's deceased because of intergenerational complex trauma, and his brother's very unwell. Now, when I say this, it's because we can look back over the generations and see what was happening before. And at the bare minimum, emotional neglect, okay? Now, I have clients that come to me and say, but I had a good life. Why is this impacting me? And emotional neglect means that there can be no attachment, or minimal or not enough attachment with the mother. Okay, so we were brought up in times when we didn't talk about emotions. I mean, I remember one time with my nan, she was up in my state 2 minutes down the road from me, been there 3 weeks, and I burst out crying when I found out on the phone, and I said, can I come and see you? And this is my favourite nan that I took time off work for and go and have holidays with and all sorts. And she said, yes, as long as we don't talk about this. So I want you to be aware that the fact that we were raised, generationally speaking, where we didn't talk about our emotions, we didn't have discussions, and then when there's dysfunction, generational dysfunction, which my family is full of it, on both sides, then we're going to be looking at a greater impact as well. And this is where the complex comes from, because no 2 people are impacted the same way, okay? So we have to be willing to be aware that we are the first generation with the neuroscience, okay, that backs up all the childhood developmental trauma and how it comes out later in life. And all of a sudden our health, takes this increasing decline. And we can be saying, I don't know why this is happening to me. Like, it doesn't make sense at all. And I know I certainly said that a lot. Like, why? Why did I choose somebody to marry the second time when I thought I had it all together, all sorted, and yet I still made the same mistake? And it wasn't until I've gone in and done a lot of research and understanding into the psychological side of it and the psychological wound that we have. We can have biological, physiological, mental, soul, spiritual wounds, and with all of them having different impacts on our individual life, you can begin to understand why it's complex with everybody. However, the good news is with the neuroscience, we can begin to turn things around. We can begin to reclaim our life. So if you're looking externally, those are the external things. It's relationships, it's our health, our careers, our parenting abilities. Are they getting derailed? And we're not liking what's happening. And that's why I was looking for a lot of years for information, because none of it made sense. I'm adulting, I'm away from the family, I'm making my own decisions, so why is my health going backwards faster than a runaway train? Okay? Now, here are some of the other things that you can recognise, and I'll put this up so you can pause it again if you need it. Okay, now let me just grab a bigger version so I can read it for you. This is, in essence, how we can begin to recognise various things with complex PTSD from childhood development trauma. Childhood developmental trauma. I'm having a really good day on a Sunday afternoon. Okay, so complex PTSD is thought to be more severe if the traumatic events happened early in life. The trauma was caused by a parent or carer. The person experienced the trauma was often over a long period of time, and the person was alone during the trauma, so you had nobody else to reach out to. Think of all the times that even non-verbally in our families, it was like, keep it secret, keep it safe. You don't talk about that outside of the family home. Heck, we didn't even talk about it inside the family home. But outside in the world, we were expected to put on the front that we were happy family, okay? There's still contact with the person responsible for the trauma in this day and age. That may or may not be true, but people are learning that they're allowed to walk away and say no more. Okay, now this is really important to remember. It may take years for the symptoms of complex PTSD to be recognised. A child's development, including their behaviour and self-confidence, can be altered as we get older. So even down to the point where we keep getting into relationships where we think in the beginning that we've chosen the right person, but then everything starts falling apart again and we go, how did this happen? Okay, so adults with complex PTSD may lose our trust in people and feel separated from others. And also another thing, we can have a trauma response that is automatic from the brain level that says, I'm better off alone. Okay, and we have to be aware of that, because we, especially in today's age, we don't want to be self-isolating any more than is necessary. We can have flashbacks. Now, flashbacks can be a whole sensation running through our body with a visual of the event that happened, and they can be incredibly physically painful. It varies, but if you're having a flashback, trust me, you know it, because you're sitting there and it's happening right in front of your eyes. Nightmares, I find as I'm towards the end of the healing journey, and I'll use that term loosely, the end, but the nightmares have been often, but I find also the nightmares happen because it's at night that my brain processes all the unresolved things that happen throughout my life, okay? In America, I'm aware that people can get medication for nightmares. I don't know what it is, but in our group, they do talk about it at times. Repetitive and distressing images or sensations. So remember, our first port of call into the brain is our senses. So we can have sensory overload, especially if we go somewhere new as an adult. It can be like sensory overload because our brain hasn't mapped out this situation before. I used to have that happen all the time. It used to drive me nuts. I'm like, why can't I just walk into a place where I've never been and just be at ease like everybody else? And it all comes back down to things that are happening in our brain. Avoidance and emotional numbing, physical sensations such as pain, sweating, feeling sick or trembling. And hands up, everybody who's had the anxiety where it's just dripping off you, the perspiration's dripping off you. And it's so embarrassing, especially if you're in air conditioning. People are just looking at you like, what's wrong? I'll just pat myself and pretend everything's okay. When my body's having this physical response that I don't know what's at the time. I didn't know what was driving it, and I feel really embarrassed, but I want to stand here and be able to talk to you, you know? It's having that self-compassion now to understand that my brain was driving it, and there was nothing I could do about it at the time because I didn't understand how to work with it. Hyperarousal and hypoarousal. So that's when we're looking at, you'll hear a lot of freeze, fawn, flight, fight, okay? Depression, anxiety, phobias, drug and alcohol misuse, self-harming, feelings of shame or guilt, difficulty controlling your emotions, especially if the brain's on survival mode. It's like whooshka, the minute anything happens, the emotional response goes off. And when our brain's functioning, we don't actually have those responses as an adult, and it's so nice. And periods of losing attention and concentration, dissociation, okay? Physical symptoms such as headaches, dizziness, chest pains and stomach aches. A lot of people are finding all the, now I've just lost the word, you know, the inflammation, and I used to get migraines, and there's just so many things happening in the body, okay, that drive ill health, that are driven by complex PTSD. Okay, cutting yourself off from family and friends. Sometimes that's necessary. Sometimes it is a trauma-driven response. It's up to you as an adult to determine whether it is a trauma-driven response or it's a necessity for your recovery journey. Relationship difficulties, suicidal ideation. Now, I want to just touch on the relationship difficulties because it's such a prime area of our life because we're wired for relationships, and too often we can read social media posts that say, oh yeah, I just need boundaries. Oh yeah, I just need to put that in place. Or, oh look, I've read so many of them, they drive me nuts. It's not that simple. Relationships are something that we work on. They're complex, they're involved. It's not just about being vulnerable because first of all, especially if we've got complex PTSD, we need to know that the person that I'm choosing to be vulnerable with even knows what the word is. Not to mention, we need to know that we're both on the same page about vulnerability and what that means, and can we have a conversation about it. And it's not until you have somebody who actually cares deeply about maintaining a relationship, and it's not about an interpersonal, intimate relationship either. I have the most amazing relationships with my girlfriends, my best friends, the three people that are closest to me, and to my children, okay? Those people are the people that will come to me and say, this is what's happening, I need you to tell me what you're thinking, and then I'm saying, okay, what are you thinking? Whereas our communication come unstuck. What is it we're believing? And we sit down as adults and work through those situations. Not everybody is capable of that at this point in time, but we start, and you can start whether it's with a certified trauma recovery coach, whether it's with a therapist, a psychologist, a psychiatrist, counsellor. There are lots of different people that you can work these things through with and come to an understanding. Now, with complex PTSD, we have a psychological wound that makes it really hard for us to see our part in the lack of communication. Okay, now I'm not saying we're at fault. I'm saying we have part of us that needs help with being able to work through what's happening for us in order that we can then put into place what's happening with other people. Now, my youngest son in particular and I have an ongoing thing. What do you call it? An ongoing communication aspect of our relationship where if one of us is not on point, we're not happy or there's upset, he's actually really good. And he will come to me and say, we need to sort this out. And yes, I taught them that. I actually taught the three of them to do it amongst themselves, never thinking for 1 minute that they would be the ones that come to me and say, Mum, we've got to sort this out. And what a joy. Now, it's been really healing for me to have somebody come to me and for me not to be the one that initiates it, because I was the one initiating it in my other relationships. And what it's helped me see, because then I have to be willing to see what was inside of me, what was happening for me, why couldn't I speak up? So initially I couldn't even speak up. And it was because I've been shut down for so long, and then I could feel that I was holding a grudge. And then we got to the point where we kept communicating, and then I don't hold a grudge anymore. I'm not somebody that holds grudges, so I found out. It's just I hold on to it when I haven't had a discussion that we need to have as human beings, okay? So no blame, no shame, no going back over it. These things evolve naturally as part of relationships. We can't just sit down and go, well, it's got to be black and white, this, and this, because we have to be in a space where we can own our own part in it. I have had so many people come into our group, our Facebook group this is, who've said that their children don't speak to them anymore and it's all their children's fault. Now, that's okay. I'm not going to disagree. I don't know the situation. But here's what I do know. If you're pointing a finger out, there's more pointing back at us. And we have got to be learning how to discover what's happening inside of us for there to be change to happen, okay? And it stops with us because we're adults now. And we could have a whole other chat show about how much I've hated. And there's so many things that I've had to do to be well. But I've also learnt to say that I hate certain things, and I've learnt to laugh at it as well. I don't do that anymore, but I went through a stage of it. So you're allowed to hate that. We have to do this stuff. But I promise you, I can promise you that the benefits are worth it, because I see it every week with my clients that I work with. I see the value and the benefit of doing the work in their lives as well. Okay, that's it for today. Have a wonderful, wonderful week. And for everybody who's started to email me, you can go to my website page. I'll put a link in with this, and you can look up under the home page about Linda, because then you can read my story and get an idea of why I've been storming down the halls to find out what's wrong and developing ways that we can begin